Matthew 16, Jesus, in verse 13, he takes the apostles to the district of Caesarea Philippi. And what's happening at Caesarea Philippi, they're in the process of building a regional capital. The regional capital was at Caesarea down on the seacoast. I don't know if the mosquitoes were too bad or what the deal was down the seacoast, but anyhow, they're building a regional capital inland, and that's going to be Caesarea Philippi. So Jesus, with that backdrop then, the new regional capital built, the power, the might, the authority of Rome, he's using that as a backdrop for what's about to follow. Of course, he engages in a little conversation with the apostles, say, who do people say the Son of Man is? And they said, well, John, some say John the Immerser, some Elijah, some others, Jeremiah, one of the prophets. He comes back in verse 15 and says, who do you say that I am? In Matthew 16:16, Peter comes back with this answer, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, Jesus is going to explain a little bit here. He said, blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah. Flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. Okay, now, it's a little bit of a question. How did the Father reveal that to Jesus, or to Peter? Personally, I think it's a matter of Peter watching. I mean, he's there witnessing all the miracles, right? So they actually believe that he is the Christ. You remember, let's bounce over to John chapter 1 for just a second. John chapter 1 actually takes place before Jesus comes by the Sea of Galilee and picks up Andrew and Peter and James and John. And what happened was that John the Immerser was standing there, and he's standing there with Andrew and the future apostle John, and he points out Jesus to him. Okay, so they go and they spend some time with Jesus, all right? And so after that, in verse 40, says, one of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He found first his own brother Simon and said to him, we found the Messiah, which translated means Christ. See, so early on, they're figuring out that Jesus is the Messiah or the Christ, as he put it. So I don't think it took any special revelation there in Matthew chapter 16 for Peter to say, well, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay? Now, there are other things are going on. Okay, it's one thing to draw the conclusion that Jesus is the Christ. It's another thing to draw the conclusion that he's the Son of the living God. If you turn to John chapter 10, you got to remember the apostles are, they're all eyeballs and their ears are, mule deer ears size. They're watching, they're listening, they're paying attention. Now, they're a little slow on the uptake, and that's okay. We can all kind of relate to that. It takes a while to see what it was you really saw or to hear what it was that you really heard. And I appreciate the Scripture. The Scripture's not sugarcoating anything. It's just telling us the way it really was. In John chapter 10, the Jews had challenged Jesus to tell him if he was the Christ, okay? And Jesus said, well, look, if I say this straight out, that's not going to work, okay? But in verse 37, John 10:37, Jesus said, if I do not do the works of my Father, do not believe me. But if I do them, though you do not believe me, believe the works, so that you may know and understand that the Father is in me, and I in the Father. Now, they heard stuff like this. They're here, they're watching Jesus do the miracles. Did the miracles really happen? Yes. Okay. Anybody's brought to Jesus was healed. Didn't matter, right? It wasn't just the people with the gold cards that day. It was he healed all had diseases and pains. Demoniacs, paralytics, epileptic. He healed them all. Didn't matter. They saw that. And you start have to ask the question, okay, well, who could this be here? And Jesus said, look, if you pay attention to the works, in other words, the things that he's doing, even if you don't believe my words, if you pay attention to the works, you're going to have to draw one conclusion. That is, that I'm in the Father, and the Father is in me. In other words, this is the Son of God. Okay? So Peter doesn't have to have special revelation there in Matthew chapter 16 to figure out that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Okay, it goes deeper than that, but that's as far as Peter got at this point, which is commendable. So back to Matthew chapter 16. In verse 18, then, as Jesus follows up with a little explanation of this, he says, I also say that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overpower it. Peter's Petros, Peter's Petros, P-E-T-R-O-S. Okay, basically, it's a fist-sized stone. It's one of those that we try to kick off the parking lot every so often, okay? That's a Petros, all right? Now, he says, I'm telling you, you're Peter, you're this Petros. Now he says, upon this Petra. Okay, Petra is a big old chunk of bedrock sticking up, when you get over toward Butte, there's something that's called the Boulder Batholith. And the Boulder Batholith is a huge chunk of granite-based rock that underlies everything in to Tobacco Roots to Helena, over to Phillipsburg, and on, into the highlands and all that. It's a huge chunk of bedrock, okay? And the mountains are like if my fist here is the Boulder Batholith, my knuckles are kind of like the mountains, the Tobacco Range, the Elkhorns, and it's a tremendous place for all kinds of mineral, the gold, the silver, the copper. That's all part of what's going up there. But a lot of times you'll find chunks of bedrock. I mean, maybe a little tiny bit of grass, but you got this nothing but bedrock. And those rocks there are pretty awesome. They're all water washed, by the way, which tells you that they were there when the floodwaters were draining off. But that's what Jesus said. I'm going to build my church on. I'm going to build it on this bedrock. Okay? Big, solid, unmovable, and unshakable. Now, the bedrock that he's building his church on is the truth that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. See, that's the foundational truth upon which the church is built. See, so when Peter makes a statement, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God, Jesus says, yes. This is the bedrock point. Now you see that the Gospel of John, once again, kind of brings out the development of this a little bit. Let's go to John chapter 9 as an example. John chapter 9, you got the blind guy, and Jesus is running for his life. Okay, it's always interesting to me. The Jews have picked up stones to throw at him to kill him because he just made the statement to the Jews. He said, before Abraham was born, I am. See, he's claiming to be the great I am. Well, they understood that correctly, so they're picking up stones to throw at him. They're trying to kill him. So Jesus is running. Okay, so he's running down through here, a section, and there's this guy, a blind guy, on the corner. So the apostles pick a convenient time here to ask the question. Jesus running for his life. Oh, hey, Lord, who sinned, this guy, this blind here, or his parents? Well, great. Now, Jesus has got to answer that question. I mean, and he points out, look, it wasn't that this guy sinned or his parents that he was born blind. It's so that the works of God can be manifested in him. See, the physical things like that are not as a result of sin. I mean, there's elements where we understand fetal alcohol syndrome or things like that carry over sometimes because the parents sinned. But, generally the physical condition of a human being is not because of anybody's sin, because there's an overall plan that God has in motion, which is very encouraging to know that everybody has a very important part in God's overall plan. So Jesus healed a guy. I mean, Jesus actually, again, it's interesting to me, a lot of times when Jesus heals somebody, he spits on them. He spits in their eyes, he spits in their ears. In this case, he's going to spit on the ground, okay? And he, makes a little bit of mud out, daubs it in the guy's eye, said, you go this way, I'll go this way. Guy went down the pool of Siloam, and he was healed. Problem was, it was a Sabbath, right? So it's the guy's fault that he got healed on the Sabbath. So you got to understand how when people get a certain mindset, okay, we see it today. Does truth matter? Does truth matter? It doesn't matter at all. Okay, Mel and I were talking a little bit about, Hunter Biden's deals in Ukraine, right? And the emails that have surfaced and so forth. And, and I just made the comment because, Mel and I had an earlier conversation about Hillary Clinton. And I said, well, Hunter Biden will go to jail at the same time Hillary does. And, well, we know what's going to happen. See, because what about truth? See, truth is non-existent. All that matters is a political agenda. Here we got a serious disease called COVID-19. We know it's serious because the media tells us it is. And it is starting to overrun the hospitals a little bit, so there's elements there. Can you figure out the truth about COVID-19? Can you figure out the truth of whether hydroxyquinone is actually work or not? If you dig deep enough, you can, but you can't get it from the media. Truth. Non-existent thing out there. Some people are starting to call it COVID-1984. I thought that was interesting. Jesus, the agenda. It doesn't matter that this guy, it wasn't his fault that he was healed on the Sabbath. He gets to be the poster boy to get Jesus, right? So they put him on trial, and he says, look, he healed me. What happened? I was blind. Now I see. Okay? So in verse 18, the Jews then did not believe it of him that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the very one who received his sight. And they questioned him, saying, is this your son, who you say was born blind? Then how does he now see? Okay. Parents said, we know this is our son. We know he's born blind, but how he now sees, we do not know. Who opened his eyes? We know nothing. Okay. Ask him, he is of age, he'll speak for himself. And his parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed him to be the Christ, he's to be put out of the synagogue. They're already working, right? Anybody confesses him to be the Christ, boom, you're out of the synagogue. Out of Jewish society. Make you think, won't it? You think fear isn't a factor in people's thinking? You think you don't start running calculations? What happens if I say this? Okay. John chapter 12. Jesus did a lot of miracles, okay? In John 12:36, Jesus said, while you have the light, believe in the light, and you may become sons of light. It says, these things Jesus spoke, and he went away and hid himself from them. But though he'd performed so many signs before them, yet they were not believing in him. Of course, that was to fulfill a couple prophecies from Isaiah. And it says, verse 42, John 12:42, nevertheless, many even of the rulers believed in him, but because the Pharisees, they were not confessing him for fear that they'd be put out of the synagogue. For they loved the approval of men rather than the approval of God. If you say you believe Jesus is the Christ, if you say you believe he is the Son of God, you're out. And these guys are even the rulers of their own synagogues, and they were afraid of the brotherhood of the Pharisees so much, in their own synagogue they wouldn't say it. So you can see why this is going to be one of the key factors when Christianity comes on stream. You've got to be willing to say publicly, I believe Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And you're not willing to say that, you're not going to be a disciple of Jesus, because you're going into a hostile world, and the world's going to increasingly put pressure on you to shut your mouth. See it in a lot of areas, right? A lot of areas. Caught a little bit of Rush Limbaugh the other day. I was sitting at the bank and for a half hour, 45. It's so hard to get anything done today, right? Just to make a deposit. And the church deposits, you guys thankfully put in lots of checks. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Keeps things rolling. And so you can't just take pictures of those and, do it that way. And by the way, I was thinking about this the other day. A lot of young people, they don't use checks. I mean, no, there's a lot of people, young guys, people here that don't use checks. That doesn't comprehend. That doesn't compute in my brain. But you can actually go to Christ Church online. I think Randall and Sherry have a means set up where you can contribute if you want to. Because I know when Matthew Wilson was staying with us, he had to go down to an ATM, to get cash money, to try to, make a contribution to the church, because he didn't have a checkbook, So I just had to say that while I was thinking. Okay, but the day of the secret disciple is going to be gone. See, these guys, they're afraid. They're afraid to open their mouth. Okay, Rush Limbaugh, he was talking about how that somebody did a poll. I think it was Pew, usually a reliable poll. 60 to 70% of those who are liberal politically felt like they could speak openly about their viewpoints. Okay, 77% of those who held conservative viewpoints did not feel like they could speak openly about their viewpoints. Now, does that really surprise us? You can see there's a public pressure being created here. See, and so you start running calculations before you open your mouth. And, I was thinking about getting myself a red hat and white letters on it. And I was going to put MACA on it. I thought people misread that. And but that would stand for Make America Christian again. But I don't think that would get much of a good reception either, right? See, pressure. These guys are under pressure here. Even though ruler of their own synagogue, they are afraid to confess that they believe Jesus is the Christ. Now, the bad guys knew about it. If we go to Matthew chapter 26, we see Jesus being arrested here, and they're going to bring him to the high priest, okay? And verse 57, Matthew 26, 57. Now those who had seized Jesus led him away to Caiaphas, the high priest, where the scribes and the elders were gathered together. We got the high priest, we got the Sadducees, we got the Pharisees, we got all the big boys, and they're there. And but Peter was following them at a distance as far as the courtyard of the high priest, and entered in and sat down with the officers to see the outcome. Now the chief priests and the whole council kept trying to obtain false testimony against Jesus so that they might put him to death. Okay, if you go before the International Criminal Court or any of the lesser courts that they're in the process of setting up, okay, you're not going to be able to call witnesses in your defense. Hearsay and hearsay of hearsay can be used against you. Okay, that's how these courts are set up. See, that's how the communists do it. The purpose of the court trial is not to try to determine innocent or guilt. It's to give a visible covering for the fact that you're already guilty and they're going to punish you. Okay? Now that's what the USMCA set in motion. See, that President Trump personally pushed through, in case you think he's a good guy. USMCA sets it up so that U.S. sovereignty is no longer in existence. And the protections you have under the Constitution, including the right to trial by jury and the defense right to subpoena witnesses, that is going to be gone. You have to understand it. It's already done. See, Christians have to process where we're at in this world. And it has to do with whether we're going to be able to keep making the good confession that Jesus is the Christ or not. You got to prepare mentally. So you can't play games with this stuff. Is this trial here for Jesus? Is that an honest attempt to determine innocence or guilt? No, it's a kangaroo court. They already decided. They're just giving it the covering. That's what they're doing, just give it a covering. Well, we put him on trial. This is what we found. Okay, it was already determined. Brought forth false witnesses, false testimony. Didn't find any, it says in verse 60, even though many false witnesses came forward. Later on, 2 came forward, and they said, this man stated, I'm able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days. The high priest finally stood up and he said to him, do you not answer? What is it these men are testifying against you? Jesus kept silent. Any point of him saying anything in his defense? Any point of him saying, hey, could we have a reasonable discussion here? Yeah, have a reasonable discussion. You're kidding yourself if you think you're going to have a reasonable discussion with these guys. That's why our job is just to try to find truth seekers out here in the midst of the public. Okay? Don't you answer? What's these men who testify? Jesus kept silent. High priest said to him, I adjure you by the living God that you tell us whether you are the Christ, the Son of God. They knew what the claim was, didn't they? They knew. The enemies a lot of times listen closer to what's being said than the guys that are trying to follow the truth. The enemies figure out really quickly, turf war going on. I got to protect my turf. Who's the first people to show up to hear John the Immerser? They sent, from Jerusalem, people to ask John, who are you, buddy? What are you doing? You the Christ? You the great prophet? You Elijah? Who are you? See, they're here. Public is enemies here. The high priest knew what the claim was. He says, I adjure you by the living God. You tell us whether you're the Christ, the Son of God. Now, they know he can't be. They know he's a pretender. They know that he's just coming to upset their Roman relationship. That's all he's doing. He can't be there. You tell us. You tell us. Are you the Christ? They want him to say it, okay? Jesus said, you said it yourself. Nevertheless, I say to you, hereafter you shall see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of power and coming on the clouds of heaven. And so the high priest tears his robes, right? Says, we got him. We got him, right? They knew. In John chapter 20, verse 30. John's going to tell you somewhere around 70, 80 AD why he writes this book. Okay? John 20:30. Therefore, many other signs Jesus also performed in the presence of the disciples, which are not written in this book. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. Believing you may have life in his name. The rock, the foundation upon which the church is built, is the truth and the willingness to confess the truth that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. You're not willing to say it and keep saying it, you're not going to heaven. No matter the cost. We don't know how this is all going to play out. In October 18 of 2019, could we have predicted where we're at right now? I think one of the speakers at Family Camp brought that up. Would we have predicted where we're at? No, we couldn't. And these things have a way of escalating. How many think there's going to be violence in connection with the November election? How many think there's going to be violence? Yeah. One way or another, right? You know, if Trump wins, going to be violence, right? If Biden wins, and so the Harris-Biden presidency takes place, there's going to be violence, right? Right? Katie was showing me something yesterday. There's people in an old folks' home, and they're all sitting out there in their wheelchairs, and the sign said Biden for president, except the P was crossed off. Okay, I mean, what a state our country is at when they try to keep the guy in the basement so that he doesn't show. I mean, and if the election is in doubt for some reason, right? It gets thrown into the House of Representatives. With special provisions, how the House of Representatives. We don't know, do we? We don't know. See, but the one thing that we know for sure is this bedrock truth that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. And we'll make that confession, and we're going to continue to make that confession regardless. Because that's who we are. Acts chapter 8. Ethiopian eunuch, queen's treasure. Got enough money to finance the copying of his own personal set of scrolls of the Old Testament. I was showing Katie my Tanakh yesterday. We'd kind of watched a movie that had some modern Jewish stuff in it, and so I said, I've got Tanakh downstairs. She didn't know it. She doesn't know what's in the basement yet. We're just, she's pretty much limited to upstairs, And so I got a Tanakh, okay? Now, the T is for the Torah, and the N is Nevi'im, and K is for Ketuvim or something like that. Okay, so T, N, and K, because the Hebrew only has consonants, okay? So they pronounce that Tanakh. That's and that's the complete collection of the 39 scrolls of the Old Testament, right? And it's really interesting. I mean, it starts, it's got the Hebrew there, and then it's got the English alongside it. But it starts in the back, and you read it in the back toward the front. And it's thick. This guy, you can tell he's got all the scrolls because he's not just reading the Torah. He's reading Isaiah. Now, if you're going to go, say, Ethiopia to, the Nile River is the longest river in the world. It's over 4,000 miles. Now, the Mississippi to the Missouri to the Jefferson to the Beaverhead to Red Rock Creek, is 3,941 miles. So it's a little short, okay? But think of the Nile River being that long, okay? So Ethiopia is a long way down there is my point. This guy, by chariot, going from Ethiopia to Jerusalem and back. And so instead of watching TV on his screen, okay, he's reading the Old Testament scrolls. I suspect he started in Genesis. Okay? And by the time we get to Acts 8 on his way back, he's got to Isaiah. That's my suspicion, all right? But he's reading Isaiah 53. What a setup. Katie said, okay, we got to look at Isaiah 53. We got to see what it says. Okay? That's pretty good. If you're Jew and you're reading that, Isaiah 53, boy, there's some questions that pop. I said, but let's look at Isaiah 7:14, the way they did. A young woman, you can give birth to a child, right? Isaiah 9:6 is really interesting how they kind of fudge with the words. And that's what I noticed. Every Old Testament prophecy of Jesus in the Jewish English Tanakh, they push that language as far away as they can so that somebody reading it won't think it's talking about Jesus. Now what that tells me, they know it's talking about Jesus. Bunch of liars and hypocrites is what they are. Okay? This guy is no liar and hypocrite. He's reading Isaiah 53. In verse 34, he says, the eunuch answered Philip and said, please tell me, of whom does the prophet say this, of himself or someone else? And Philip opened his mouth and beginning, that's what you got to do, is you got to open your mouth, right? You don't ask for the business, you don't make the sale. It's simple. You don't ask for the Bible study, guess what? But what's the worst somebody can do? Kill you. But that's a victory, right? So anything less than killing you, is progress, right? So, opened his mouth and beginning from the scripture, he preached Jesus to him. As they went along the road, they came to some water, and the eunuch said, look, water, what prevents me from being immersed? I mean, we talked about that before. The guy's preaching Jesus, and the guy wants to know, Phil's preaching Jesus, the guy wants to know about water. If you're going to preach Jesus, you know what? Including immersion, isn't it? Otherwise, he wouldn't know to ask the question. Water, what's stopping me from being immersed? Philip must have talked about that, huh? I guess he hadn't studied John Calvin enough. That's the only thing I can conclude, all right? What prevents me from being immersed? And Philip said, if you believe with all your heart, you may. And he answered and said, what? I believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God. The good confession prior to being immersed, necessary. And a person not willing to make that statement publicly, they cannot be a disciple of Christ. The rock on which the church of Jesus Christ was built. One more thing. Back to Matthew 16. Jesus said, upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. He said, I'm going to build my church on that confession, upon that truth. Now, Jesus has one church. Jesus didn't say, upon this rock I will build a multiplicity of denominations so that whatever you choose you can follow, right? One rock, many paths, come on. One rock. Okay? One church. Built it. And the details of that construction process, the foundation, are in the pages of the New Testament writings. They laid the foundation, and the record of that foundation being laid upon the apostles of the New Testament prophets is recorded. But the details that continue to how to build with evangelists and pastors and teachers are in those pages. Now, the only way we can claim to be Christ's church is if we are following the instructions. We can stick the name out in front. Thanks for Tommy and Kelly. Hey, you better check that sign, Tommy. It wouldn't start to work on it. Just the way it is. Really appreciate it. But, the sign can say Christ Church. That doesn't mean it is, unless it's following the instructions, unless it's following the doctrines. Anybody can claim anything. One of the things that Jesus told one of the churches in Revelation, you got a name that you're alive, but you're dead. To be Christ's church, the church of Christ, you have got to follow the instructions. You don't follow the instructions? You're not. Yeah. Now, Jesus built the church. He designed the church to do a job. And that job is to seek and to save the lost and to conserve the saved. In other words, to get people to heaven. Okay. You know, I had an older Impala, and the dimmer switch quit working on it. And, it quit on dim, all right? I mean, it would stay on dim, but if I wanted to get it to bright, I could actually push it way far forward and hold it with my hand and stay on bright. And that was a problem when I'm going between Belt, Montana, and Bozeman through White Sulphur Springs, at night, okay? That's a real problem, see? So I know I got to get this thing fixed. So, I go down, I get my oil changed at Firestone, get the tires rotated, line and balanced. I said, hey, can you guys take a look at that dimmer switch and fix it? And they said, sure. Called me back, says, yeah, we can fix it. We got a price for you, $745 aftermarket. So, whoa, that's a dimmer switch? And so I go to my local mechanic, Matt Wilson. I say, Matt, this is what they're going to charge me. So, Matt, he goes down to AF&T, auto body parts down there. And I don't know how Matt does it, but he's always the kind of guy that somehow gets behind the counter, And so you're out there in the yard looking, right? I mean, yeah. So, obviously Matt's a great personality guy. He obviously cares, I guess. That's how it works. So he finds a dimmer switch for the Impala. He said, Dad, the only thing is, he said, I gotta buy a tool. There's only one tool that'll kind of get that off and put it on your Impala. And he said, I'm gonna have to spend about $45 for that. Is that okay? Deal, But that's tool. See, my point is that tool, specially designed, to do whatever man has to do, to get the old dimmer switch off and put the new one on over that steering column. Now, I'm ballpark on it, and that Matt, and what has to be done. Because I don't know. I don't do the hands-on thing. But my point is that tool was specially designed to do a job. What if you mess with the design? Not going to do the job, is it? Jesus' church is designed to do the job of reaching the lost and conserving the saved. And you start messing with the design, what are you going to do? You mess the tool will not do the job. That's why I remind people, we study the church history and stuff. The first thing that the devil did was messed with the design. He messed with the design before he messed with the doctrine. See, once he started elevating the guys as bishop over elders, then he could start implementing everything else that resulted in Catholicism. That's how critical design is. When Jesus said, upon this rock I'm going to build my church, don't underestimate the value of that statement. So we have a tremendous obligation to build in accordance with what is written in the New Testament. To keep the purpose and pattern in mind. One of the biggest challenges we have today is getting people immersed, but they don't want to be a part of the church. They want to be immersed, but they don't want to be, they don't want to come to the assembly, maybe once in a while, but don't want to come to assembly. Okay. The Lord designed the church. The church is the ecclesia. It means a congregation of called out people who've come together for a purpose. That's what an ecclesia is. See, the Lord designed it. And you want to be okay with Jesus, but you don't want to be a part of the church? That isn't working either. Not going to work. See, because you're messing with the design. You don't want to participate in the design. Look, I know the church consists of people. Okay? it kind of reminds me of a college professor at the U of M, Missoula. He said it'd be great being a college professor if he didn't have to deal with students. Right? Taxpayer's dollar that work for you, okay? Okay, church consists of people, right? Coming in from all kinds of backgrounds, viewpoints, perspectives, and it's kind of, everybody's weird but me, I mean, that's kind of how it is, right? And everybody has their little quirky things, because I'm the standard. I mean, that's how it works, right? In other words, you're going to have to put up with people. Actually, as the Bible kind of says that, in Colossians chapter 3, sometimes you just got to put up with each other. Okay? Now, some people want to avoid interaction with people because of the emotional issues that sometimes are involved. That's part of our personal growth. That is part of being the church, is going through the personal growth necessary to be able to handle our attitudes and our perspectives and working with people. That's how God's going to produce in us love, joy, peace. What's the next one? Oh, patience. That's the one. Kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self. That's how he's going to produce those things in us, is through the people in the church. So we don't want to avoid that. We want to embrace it. See, that Jesus said, I'm going to build my church. And we are the living stones. We're the building blocks in it. So God wants us to learn to enjoy the interaction and to rejoice in it and to build the fellowship and the positive things and the teamwork and all that goes with it. Hey, the enemy is out there. And it's a big enemy. And so in everybody's mind, Jesus has got to get a lot bigger so that everything else gets a lot smaller. And that's the solution. You're a little bit anxious about things. Get Jesus bigger. Having trouble with a brother or sister or some family member? Jesus gets bigger. See, the bigger Jesus is, the smaller everything else is. He's the builder. He said, upon this rock, I will build my church. And you know what? He's getting it done. With us or without us. I don't know about you, but I want to be the with us. I want to be on his side in that building process. So that great things happen going forward as the gospel of Jesus Christ goes right into the teeth of the forces of the New World Order. Now maybe somebody here today wants to be a part of that. It isn't. If you're not immersed into Christ, you're not a part of that yet. And if this is you and this is your time and today's the day, you come as we stand. The continuing confession that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, is part of the commitment necessary. Commitment, the key word. Commitment. Commitment to the forward progress of the church of the living God. Make sure that we're on track personally. Do our best to make sure the congregation's on track. And then work together to get it done. And he's going to back us. The gates of Hades are not going to stop us. The gospel can reach down into the most lost individual. The individual is most trapped in the recesses of sin and draw them out there. Those gates aren't going to stop us.